Oh mama, I'm in fear for my life from the law. The law. Oh mama, I'm in fear for my life from the law.
Stop and frisk, stop and frisk, stop and frisk, stop and frisk. Fuck the police, yeah I said it, fuck them. Let them come in, Larry Davis style, bust them. Eye for an eye, leave everyone blind. But I'm tired of losing mine. Another child dies, another child beat by the cop.
The Don't Walk On By format has developed over periods since then. And I want to also tell you that Don't Walk On By, that Stop and Search, is never a single event. It's always part of a political situation. That the police, the state, the magistrates' courts, all members of authority, at times head teachers and schools, are having a plan, have something going on, and the stop and search that you may see on the street is just one part of something that is occurring. This is not conspiracy theory. This is what actually happens. The most important thing about stop and search, of course, as you know, is that it's a public demonstration. It's on the street and it's open. It's not a private arrest. It's not in somebody's house. It's a public humiliation, a public assault on the streets. And sometimes very dramatic, with helicopters overhead, lots of police vans, big noise and fury, caution, they put tape around the area, keep back, stop and search, a drama, a public drama on the streets. And sometimes it's merely one lad and two officers who banged him up against a wall and are searching him. And after maybe even as little as 10 minutes, nod and he's allowed to walk off. But the fact is, it's a public display of power. And that is why, because it's public, they put it in the public domain. We, as the public, must step up to our responsibilities for what is going on. It's very important, of course, if you do observe, if you do stop, if you do watch, that you know your basic rights, that you have a bus card, as it's called, a solicitor's number, which you should carry on you at all times and which is available. All organisations, anti-racist organisations have those, and your basic rights, of course, are your right to observe and your right not to give your name. You do always take a marginal risk of being told that you are disrupting the police in their activities, and you do always face the possibility of arrest for doing that. However, charges usually don't often follow after that sort of arrest. They simply want you to get out of the way. But essentially, this public display is exactly for one reason, and that is to scare us and to show us police and state power. And that is why we have to deal with our own fear and we have to fight it. So, a lot of stop and search is smoke and mirrors, as I say. It's an expression of some plan or decision from the town hall and the schools and the police of they have decided to move against some people in some area of their jurisdiction for, well, almost any grounds they can, because they sense there is a threat building up. This was the case with the Broadwater Farm 1985 uprising, which I don't know how much you know about. I understand that there is a film that was made not so long after, which might at last be coming onto our screens. But Broadwater Farm was the largest post-war police confrontation on mainland Britain in 1985. And that situation had been created over some years and was deliberately provoked to carry out a plan to somehow dismantle the estate. Right. And that could have been stopped as an event long before if we had everybody not walking on by. This is a picture of Princess of Wales, Princess Diana, at the Broadwater Farm Youth Association, which had an opening ceremony. This is just 2 months before the riot, the uprising, in which you may or may not know, a policeman was killed. The policeman slipped, was being chased. It was an enormous, hours-long fight with the police, with cars being burnt, looting, windows being smashed, and it ended up with the killing of P.C. Blakelock, who slipped on a stairway and was basically lynched on the ground by a whole gang of people. And it's difficult to say that anyhow, they have never been able to nail anyone responsible for it, which is not to say that 6 people were not charged with his murder, including Winston Silcott and Engin Raghip, and each of those people who were charged with his murder were finally, after some years and some years of imprisonment, were finally released on grounds that the charge was fraudulent. The means of getting the charges was illegal, only based on confession and based on confessions that had been rewritten and so forth. And that is the end of that. But it's so interesting that we see with the visit of Diana, and there were a whole layer of respectable local people working on the estate with police liaison to create that situation where Diana was invited and Haringey councillors were there. And at the same time, that was happening on top of a years-long persecution and deprivation of young Black people on the estate. And not only young, the older citizens were also very badly treated. The whole actual riot evening took off because Cynthia Jarrett, who was a mother of a young man, was knocked over by the police when they rushed in to search her house. She wasn't on the estate. She lived nearby in a little terraced house in Tottenham. The police didn't have a search warrant. They say they were looking for stolen goods, and they were looking for her son, Floyd Jarrett. The police rushed into the house, shouldered her aside. She fell on the floor. She was not a well woman, and within hours, she died in hospital. This news spread to the estate, and the fury of the young people then took place. The youngsters on the estate, as I say, had been consistently for years harassed, persecuted, and the racist abuse, I hope your generation, I hope it's alien to your generation, but the racist abuse was free and unstopped and came from every direction, police, teachers, authorities, absolutely incredible. The day after the uprising, as the lights dawned on the estate, which with the burnt out cars and the wreckage, especially on that deck where Princess Diana had been, called the Tangmere Deck, which is where the community centre was. The local black councillor, Bernie Grant, who was later to go on to become a Haringey MP, Bernie Grant said, "The police got a bloody good whopping." Now, he knew what he was talking about, because he had known for years this unending harassment of young people on the estate. And he meant that. But of course, he was dragged through the mud for it. He was punished for that. The Sun newspaper the next day had a picture of Bernie Grant, and they said that, and they likened him to an ape, saying he had been eating a banana and juggling an orange as he spoke to the press. After that, media fury, which we can only reflect back with our own fury of how people were treated. Now, Winston Philcott lived on the estate, and he was targeted by the police, had been targeted for some years as an independent and politically minded person who spoke for the youth. And the police undoubtedly were out to get him, and undoubtedly were out to pin the murder charge on him, picking up others in their wake. The so-called investigation that followed the murder of PC Blakelock was unbelievable. The estate was put under a state of siege. Nobody was allowed in or out for weeks. Every home was searched, doors were smashed, all sorts of things were taken for examination, which had no relevance to anything at all, including personal insurance cards, baby food. A reign of terror ensued. There were 300 arrests, and many of those were of children, 12 and 13-year-old boys in particular. And their conditions of arrest and detention were appalling, illegal. They were kept in their pants and vests for hours on end in freezing cells with no access to an adult who they were entitled to, no caution as to their rights. And it was to get from them words that the police wanted to hear, which is that Silcott told them to do this, that, and the other. He was there and he was guilty. Now, Winston Silcott had said on that day when Princess Diana appeared at Tangmere, he said a few words to her quietly and politely, but he said to her, "Next time you come, bring some jobs with you." And he was a target. He was never. He was told off for that severely by the elders of the black community, by the local bishop and everybody, right? And I'm afraid that to some extent that sealed his fate. But Delroy Lindo, his friend, and Silcott, and Stafford Scott, and others had been, since they were aged 10, 11, had been weekly, every week, stopped and searched, charged with having bad brakes on their bikes, fined 50 quid for having bad brakes, so on. Yeah. So, if stop and search then had people said, "Look, what's going on with these young people, we're going to record it," then the build-up of tension, the build-up would not have happened. So what I want to say is that when these big events happen, behind it is always some other narrative. This is why we hear this week that the policemen who were involved in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, they are now possibly going to be prosecuted themselves for illegalities. It was a long time ago, But the fact is, it's nothing is what it seems. And it's because nothing is what it seems that we have an obligation to stand, don't walk on by and watch. A bit scary, agreed. Don't Walk On By was started, in fact, in about 30 years ago by Newham Monitoring Campaign, Newham Borough in East London. After the murder, the racist murder by, well, it's racist murder, by a gang of white youths of an Asian lad called Ali Beg, what was his name? And the Asian community in particular reported to the police that they knew this was going to happen and that the gangs of white youths were hanging around and were being offensive and attacking them in their homes and so forth for a long time before. And the police either ignored them, said, I don't know what you're talking about, or in fact joined in with the racist abuse in some way. So the Newham people decided that they would have on them a tape recorder and they would record what the police were saying because nobody believed them. Nobody believed that the British police could be like that. Of course, this is a long time ago. Technology and everything else has changed. And now it's the police who are recording and taking photographs of us, and we're doing it of each other. And to some extent, it's not getting anybody anywhere because stop and search still goes up and the injustice carries on. But what is important is the exertion of our right, or our hope to have a right, to ask questions about public arrest and detention. And so that's when it started, Don't Walk On By. It still holds today. When you see a stop and search, you have to say to yourself, and sometimes you can do it in different ways. It's different if you're on your own, and it's different if you're with somebody else. One thing you can do is to say, describe what's going on. Now, you can do it just by talking to yourself, right? It's unnerving for the police. You say, now there are 6 police around him, and they're all doing so-and-so, and I think one of them is going to walk over to me and tell me to move on. Right, you can do that. You can, of course, we all have phones now. You can say it into your phone. We used to say it into our coat, pretend we had a tape recorder there. You can say it into your phone. If there are 2 of you, you can say it to each other. To articulate what's going on is really important. And that is why we have to do it. Of course, all the time, of course, we rely on PYL. PYL is push your luck. All the time we push it, we push our luck. Same as we do when we have a street stall. They say, well, you can't be here, you've got to close down. We say, okay, yes, officer, we'll be closing down in about 10 minutes. Right? Push your luck all the time. All right. So that's what you have to do, push your luck. And of course, build up the contacts, solicitors who are reasonable, counsellors who are reasonable, families, stop the isolation, stop the secrecy, and don't be taken in by their narrative. We know there's such a thing as county lines and youngsters and drug smuggling. We know all that. We get that every day. It's even on the telly. They make films about it. We know there are gang stabbings and all this sort of thing, but that's only part of the truth, if it's the truth at all. We are suspicious of all their truths and their narratives. And that's how we have to act. Because if we don't, right, it ends up bad for us and ours. And, it's all for one and one for all in the end. Okay, thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much for that, Susan. That was really interesting. discussion of, the history about the Broadwater Farm uprising, responses to police harassment, and the basis of Don't Walk On By campaigns against police harassment. So once again, for people who are watching on the stream on Facebook, YouTube, etc., I think we'll be stopping the stream in just a few more moments. But if you do want to get involved in the discussion following after it, the link is going to be posted into the chat once again, so you can join the Zoom call and get involved in what we're talking about here and the broader political implications of fighting against police harassment, the kind of structures and organizations which are needed in order to be able to actually fight back against police harassment. For the people who are still here in the Zoom call, can I ask you again to put your camera on if you are able to do so, because it just makes for a much more friendly, welcoming environment when we want to be talking with each other. So I think it's just about time to start opening up the discussion to people. So if you've got any comments or questions